Hello, everybody. We have a very urgent weather message on our hands. There is no time for an introduction here, so let's get straight into it. So, this is the Weather Prediction Center's website. The Weather Prediction Center monitors flash flooding mostly. It's what they're colloquially known for, is monitoring flash flooding. They have four risks: marginal, slight, moderate, and high risk. Marginal risk of flash flooding specifically means that there is a very small chance of isolated flash flooding here and there from thunderstorms. A slight risk means that there is a boosted chance of isolated flash flooding, and there may even be a chance of scattered flash flooding. A moderate risk means that there is a widespread flash flooding event expected, and a high risk suggests uh, that a very horrendous, very widespread, historic, life-threatening, prolific flash flooding event is expected. And if you see up here, you can sneak peek. We have two high risks of of flash flooding. We have two high risks of flash flooding back to back. There was a moderate risk of flash flooding yesterday, uh, but I did not cover that because I was busy yesterday, busy with driving and other things like that because I'm learning how to drive because I'm 16 now, so hoping to get my permit as soon as I can. But for now, I'm just doing this. Anyways, so see, there is a high risk right now. You can refer to this little box right here, this rectangle, risk of rainfall exceeding flash flood guidance within 25 miles of a point to the right of a line. High risk at least 70%, moderate risk at least 40%, slight risk at least 15%, and marginal risk at least 5%. So in the pink, there is a 70% chance of rainfall exceeding flash flood guidance within 25 miles of a point to the right of a line. So major, vigorous, numerous uh, flash flooding is expected specifically in the pink. Also in the red, but more specifically in the pink. And that that's for today. There is also a yellow risk, slight risk, that goes from southwest Texas to the eastern part of Texas and also into southwest Louisiana. Another one going from Louisiana and Arkansas, the extreme portions, all the way up to Mississippi and Alabama. We have what do you call it? We got something, another slight risk from South Carolina into Georgia. And that's really it. We have a marginal risk jettisoning off into the Rockies, another one segregated, touching Canada and going into most of Montana, and then we have one in New England from extreme northeastern upstate New York into northern Vermont, northern New Hampshire, and western Maine. So yeah, yeah, that's it. So uh, this high risk was actually a new addition to the actual risk zone. So what we're going to do first is we're going to read the information that came in the outlook before this, and then read the updated information. So it's in chronological order, so you can understand uh, essentially, you know, what what was being talked about before and what's being talked about now in a chronological order. So this is the previous discussion. Um, hmm, hmm, okay, so we're just gonna read the the previous discussion first, and then we're gonna read more about Texas. So previous discussion, southeast into the southern mid-Atlantic. General consensus on widespread convective development across the southern Carolinas into the southeast lends to at least a broad marginal risk for flash flooding in any areas north of Interstate 4 with a relative max for heavy rainfall situated across portions of Mississippi and Alabama, thanks to the presence of a meandering upper-level disturbance over the area. Uh, I don't know if that's West Virginia satellite or WV wavelength satellite this evening pinpoints a weak upper level circulation centered over northern Mississippi with an extremely slow propagation to the west-southwest over the past several hours. This particular upper circulation will be a focal point for enhanced low to mid-level convergence later this afternoon, interacting with what is a formidable moist and unstable environment across the southeastern contiguous United States. Scattered to widespread showers and thunderstorms will materialize across northern Louisiana over into Mississippi and Alabama during the peak diurnal destabilization, leading to pulse/multicellular convective development over the region with heavy rain prospects likely very high, considering the environment in place. Wet bulb zero heights over 14,000 feet on forecast soundings across Mississippi and Alabama indicate an effective warm cloud layer that will likely present efficient rainfall rates, with even pulse variety convection yielding 2 to 3 inch per hour rainfall potential during its mature phases. Slow cell motions under a weak steering pattern situated across the southeast will only act as an aid to flash flooding prospects over the region, as cells will be more likely to produce heavy bouts of rainfall for multiple hours before drifting away from an area or even just decaying overhead. 0Z, HREF, and REFS neighborhood probabilities for greater than 3 inches are solidly between 50% and 80% across central and south-central Mississippi into western Alabama, with the main area of interest lying along and north of Interstate 20 in both areas. High-resolution ensemble forecast blended mean outputs show a scattered 2 to 3 inch precipitation signal over the aforementioned area, with individual deterministics even pushing closer to 5 inches in the hardest hit locals. This is more than sufficient for maintaining the previous slight risk forecast, as well as wording for a higher end slight risk threshold likely over that area, encompassed within central Mississippi to western Alabama. Southwestern United States into the Great Basin. Continued impacts expected from lying into the western flank of the ridge centered over the northern United States, as prevailing southerly flow will just maintain a prevalent moisture advection regime poleward over the desert southwest into the Great Basin. Models remain consistent in their interpretations of locally heavy rainfall over both regions, with the heaviest quantitative precipitation forecast centered over Arizona, but potentially greater impacts in those more flash flood prone over locations in the interior west, including those slot canyons over Utah and Nevada. Rainfall rates will be the driving factor for flash flooding in this scenario, with instability generally favorable, with greater than 750 joules per kilogram of most unstable convective available potential energy over a large portion of the western contiguous United States. The combo of precipitable water anomalies greater than 2 deviations above normal and elevated instability favors at least widely scattered flash flooding potential, which this setup is leaning into the textbook signature as forecast. 0ZHREF neighborhood probabilities for greater than 1 inch have a smattering of 40 to 60% probabilities within areas of the Great Basin and Four Corners, with a more widespread 40 to 70% probability oriented in the terrain from southeastern Arizona up through the Mogollon Rim into the area of the Grand Canyon. Mogollon, I don't know. Any of these cells in the terrain will be conducive for heavy rainfall between 0.5 and 1 inches per hour, locally higher across the terrain with more of the general 0.25 to 0.75 inches per hour, or 1/4 inch to 3/4 inches per hour, over the Great Basin. Given the consistency in the model output and anomalous moisture present across the west, the previous marginal risk was maintained. Montana. Precipitable waters encroaching the 90th to 99th percentile over much of Montana, coupled with favorable instability and approaching mid-level troughing to the west, will allow for scattered to perhaps widespread convection to materialize over the northern Rockies into the central Montana later this afternoon and evening. Ample shear and elevated moisture presence will amplify the convective threat and preceding heavy rainfall posture across portions of the Big Sky country as we move into the time frame of peak diurnal destabilization. Organized cell clusters, including a few supercells, are likely to initiate over the terrain in the central portions of Montana with an eventual rapid storm motion off to the northeast, as the steering flow will allow for very quick propagations through the high plains of Montana by later in the evening. The best threat for heavy rainfall suitable for flash flooding will likely occur where the initiation point occurs and just downstream of the eventual storm motions uh, to the northeast. HREF high-resolution ensemble forecast probabilities for greater than 2 inches are generally modest in this area, with consistency in the convective allowing models for cell initiation and eventual impacts in this region northwest of Billings up through Glasgow to the Canadian border. The previous marginal risk was maintained given the threat. Northern New England. A strong closed low analyzed over northern Quebec this evening will pinwheel southeast, while north of the Canadian border in New England, but will aid in a broad brush of robust mid-level vorticity over the northern tier of both Vermont and New Hampshire into western Maine during the peak diurnal heating into the coming evening. MU Cape, or most unstable Cape, between 2,500 and 3,500 joules per kilogram, will be located across the northern tier of all three states, leading to a targeted area for locally heavy rainfall with rates likely to approach close to 2 inches per hour, as noted in the latest HREF probability fields, 10 to 25%, with 1 inch per hour rates a greater certainty, 30 to 50%. A quick 1 to 3 inches is forecast across this small area of New England. However, this area is notorious for local terrain influences that could cause issues with any appreciable rainfall in that short period of time. The previous marginal risk was expanded further north to include western Maine, given the trends in guidance for heavy rainfall to impact this area as cell maturation over neighboring Canada will likely motion into the area as we step into the late afternoon and early evening hours today. Now, I'm going to read the updated information because there is now new info, especially regarding this high risk. We haven't even talked about the most serious stuff yet. We haven't even talked about the high risk. But again, like I said, the order should go oldest to newest information. Because chronology, you know? Like chronologically, everything should go in order how it's supposed to, because it this way it's less confusion and yada yada yada. There's a high risk of excessive rainfall in the Texas Hill Country. The Texas Hill Country. Portions of the Texas Hill Country witnessed torrential rainfall last night and this morning that will continue to unfold through midday. Radar estimates show anywhere for 6 to 10 inches of rain have fallen in Medina, Uvalde, and Bandera counties, locally around 12 inches, and have already led to reports of numerous flooded roadways and water rescues. Looking ahead, the atmosphere is primed for additional rounds of excessive rainfall, with hourly rates between 2 and 4 inches likely. The 12Z RIOB out of Del Rio, Texas, showed an abundance of moisture aloft, 2.28 inches precipitable water, values well above the 90th climatological percentile, and sufficient instability for thunderstorms to work with, around 1600 joules per kilogram of energy. The mesoscale convective vortice north of Del Rio is the catalyst for this event, tapping into the rich moisture and unstable air mass to generate numerous showers and thunderstorms. Overnight convective allowing models struggled with the placement and duration of these storms this morning. Although New 12Z guidance is catching on better and is in largely good agreement that thunderstorms will continue through early afternoon. Many new 12Z convective allowing models do suggest a brief lull may occur this afternoon, but the presence of the mesoscale convective vortice is likely to keep storms in the heart of Texas through early evening. By tonight, the low-level jet over South Texas will strengthen and act to resupply additional low-level moisture towards the mesoscale convective vortice, which is forecast to hover near Del Rio, Texas. The combo of upscale ascent supported by the MCV, the low-level jet intersecting a nearby stalled frontal boundary, and the natural topographic upslope into the hill country west of Interstate 35 will reinvigorate thunderstorm activity tonight. It is worth noting all convective allowing models do have an axis of excessive rainfall, with amounts in the 2 to 4 inch range overnight, locally higher than 6 inches, but they disagree on placement. The 12Z HREF and 6Z REFS are keying in on areas closer to the mesoscale convective vortice, essentially from Medina and Bandera counties on west-northwestward towards Del Rio, with moderate chances, 40 to 60%, for additional rainfall totals greater than 3 inches, and low chances, 10 to 30%, for rainfall greater than 5 inches between 0Z and 12Z. Some members, such as the 12Z HRRR and 12Z RRFS, show the axis of heavy rainfall encroaching upon the western San Antonio suburbs. Given the rainfall that the current atmospheric environment has already produced, additional rainfall totals of 3 to 6 inches are forecast for the remainder of today and through tonight into the Texas Hill Country, with localized amounts over 10 inches possible. Wow. Reminder that this discussion strictly focuses on 16Z today through 12Z Wednesday, so this does not take into account the rainfall that is still to come for day 2 and then the second half of the week. In collaboration with the National Weather Service Austin San Antonio, given the likelihood for additional significant rainfall in areas slammed with heavy rainfall and ongoing flooding this morning, a high risk was introduced for the 16Z update. Significant to locally catastrophic flash flooding is forecast to continue today, and with heavy additional rainfall tonight likely to persist into tonight and early morning Wednesday. Potential impacts include flooded and impassable roads, flooded creeks and streams, and potential inundation of homes. Please have a reliable means of receiving weather warnings and information from local and state officials. Elsewhere, some minor tweaks to the inherited moderates and slight risks were made to account for the latest 12Z guidance, but have otherwise kept the setup featuring a pooling of anomalous moisture along a stalled frontal boundary will continue to trigger additional strong storms. Scattered areas of flash flooding this evening are expected. Coastal South Carolina. To be honest, I don't know if I'm going to make it, because my upper body's hurting from driving. But I'm probably going to have to push through. A slight risk was introduced along the South Carolina coast with this update. The 12Z Charleston sounding measured a 2.26 precipitable water value above the 90th climatological percentile. MLK over 1,000 joules per kilogram and a warm cloud layer over 14,000 feet deep. Storms have already flared up along a frontal boundary both over land and at sea. And as daytime heating ensues, additional strong storms are likely to develop. Storms will be generally slow-moving and can produce 3-inch-per-hour rainfall rates, with locally more intense, shorter bursts of torrential rainfall possible. The 12Z HREF shows low to moderate chances for localized areas of the South Carolina coast reaching or receiving over 5 inches, which is a 20 to 50%. The area has dealt with locally heavy rainfall in recent days and is a little bit more susceptible to rates approaching 3 inches per hour, particularly in the more urbanized communities. Like I said, all that wording was just for this. It's been freaking like 20 minutes. I mean, I don't know if it's been that long, but it's been freaking long. Like, I genuinely never, like, I don't even know at this point. Oh my goodness. We still got, we still got day 2, which is another high risk, day 3, which is a moderate risk, and day 4, which is a slight risk, and then day 5, I mean, I don't really think we have to focus on day 5, but we need to focus on day 4. But I'm probably still going to be ending up reading day 5 since I'm reading day 4. Anyways, day 2. Previous discussion. Mogollon Rim into central Arizona. Broad upper ridge centered over the northern U.S. will continue to provide significant moisture advection into the interior west, leading to scattered convective signals from the Canadian border down into the desert southwest with flash flooding concerns in those more susceptible areas out west. Increased confidence in a locally favorable convective maxima has allowed for not only a continuation of the previous slight risk position across the Mogollon Rim in Arizona, but also on an expansion further northwest and north, including the addition of Flagstaff proper. 0Z HREF at the end of its temporal range signaled widespread thunderstorm genesis over the terrain after 20Z Wednesday, with formidable heavy rain cores likely to materialize out of the initiation. Modest neighborhood probabilities for greater than 1 inch of rainfall exist in the small window between 18Z and 0Z Wednesday/Thursday, with the highest probabilities situated in that terrain area between Phoenix and Flagstaff within the Mogollon Rim across central Arizona. In coordination with the local Flagstaff Weather Forecasting Office, we have expanded the previous slight risk forecast to areas northwest of Flagstaff within the western periphery of the Mogollon Rim, as well as a further northward expansion to include Flagstaff proper, given the recent trends in guidance and the premise of urbanization factors providing more suitable ground conditions for flash flooding prospects. Lower Mississippi Valley into the southeast. Our meandering upper-level disturbance will continue to churn over the southern United States with sites on the lower Mississippi by Wednesday afternoon. Models are within close proximity of each other on the positioning of the disturbance, with the centroid of the circulation likely to be focused somewhere over Arkansas and the southwest corner of Tennessee. Elevated moisture and general diurnal destabilization across the lower Mississippi and southeastern United States will lead to another round of slow-moving thunderstorms that will be capable of producing locally heavy rainfall, with rates of 2 to 3 inches per hour likely in the stronger cell cores. The setup is not as prolific within the quantitative precipitation forecast means compared to the previous few periods, so the threat will remain within the marginal risk threshold. However, we will continue to monitor trends closely as we move forward in time, as the chance for a targeted upgrade, likely underneath the upper-level disturbance, is plausible. Okay. So, now let's read information about the high risk. Texas. First of all, there is a high risk of excessive rainfall across portions of the Edwards Plateau, central Rio Grande Valley, and Hill Country. Similar to Tuesday morning, just about all guidance is on board with a cluster of robust thunderstorm activity, producing excessive rainfall from portions of the Texas Hill Country and the central Rio Grande Valleys to the Edward Plateau. Guidance does agree that the lingering mesoscale convective vortice responsible for Tuesday's flooding will continue to organize rounds of thunderstorms that have the potential to train over areas hit from Tuesday's flood-producing storms. Anomalous precipitable waters surpassing 2 inches and sufficient instability will keep the atmosphere in ripe condition to support torrential rainfall. The main disagreement between guidance is the placement of the heaviest rainfall. 12Z HREF members suggest the placement of the mesoscale convective vortice is farther north and west with a more westerly positioned low-level jet over the Rio Grande. This is allowing for several HREF members to focus heavier rainfall rates over the Edwards Plateau. Meanwhile, guidance such as the HRRR and RRFS REFS probabilistic guidance as well, suggests the southern extent of the thunderstorm activity may bring the mesoscale convective vortice farther south and closer to the San Antonio metro. The low-level jet is notably stronger as well and oriented more at the Texas Hill Country. Ultimately, both placements of thunderstorms can have merit. The southern extent of Tuesday's thunderstorms is likely to drop a remnant boundary, whereas the low-level jet strengthens Tuesday night could be a trigger for thunderstorms near and west of the Interstate 35 corridor Wednesday morning and potentially redeveloping Wednesday night. Meanwhile, the mesoscale enhancement near the mesoscale convective vortice will also support a pivoting axis of strong thunderstorms near and north of the Del Rio that could even reach the Big Bend. While the exact location is unclear, the dangerous combination of prolific rainfall rates over highly saturated soils is a recipe for significant to even catastrophic flash flooding. This setup for day 2, Wednesday, is not too dissimilar to the setup that produced 6 to 12 inches of rainfall in parts of the Hill Country Tuesday morning, given the same atmospheric phenomena are on the playing field again on Wednesday. When utilizing both the HREF and REFS probabilistic suites, they paint a potentially dangerous and life-threatening situation for flash flooding Wednesday morning. In collaboration with the San Antonio and San Angelo weather forecasting offices, a high risk was introduced on day 2. A moderate risk, level 3 out of 4 threat level, also extends from the Big Bend to as far east as the San Antonio metro. While there remains uncertainty in the exact placement of the heaviest rainfall, antecedent soil conditions coupled with rainfall rates ranging between 2 and 4 inches per hour are likely to cause numerous flash floods. Life-threatening and catastrophic flash flooding is likely to occur in the hardest hit areas. Be aware that flooding is likely to occur overnight and into the early morning hours, both on Wednesday and on Thursday. Okay, so that is that for the high risk. Again, the high risk is situated across southwest Texas, and the moderate risk as well. The slight risk goes from southwest Texas all the way to the Gulf, and then the marginal risk goes out into the Mississippi, Alabama, Mississippi Valley stuff. It's not done here. Still got many more days, not even accounting for Thursday. This is Thursday. We have a moderate risk, where basically the high risk was. The high risk on Wednesday will be replaced by another moderate risk on Thursday. Genuinely, this is freaking like holy. Okay, so this is the previous discussion. Texas. Convection will continue across the Edwards Plateau and surrounds for at least one more period as the regional pattern maintains a persistence in its evolution with yet another round of convection lingering through the morning from the previous period, and one last round of nocturnal convection anticipated the evening of Thursday into early Friday morning. There is some uncertainty on the exact location of the final convective wave that will transpire, with some guidance positioning the greatest threat a little further north of the area, likely to see the greatest impacts from the prior periods. In any case, the threat is still very much robust for wherever this transpires, as the axis of heavy rainfall will likely produce more totals bordering between 2 and 4 inches, locally higher in the hardest hit locations. Considering the nature of anticipated compromised soils and ongoing flash flooding across portions of the Rio Grande Valley and the Edwards Plateau, very little additional rainfall will cause a myriad of problems, including an exacerbation of any remnant floodwaters, especially if impacted by additional heavy rainfall over 1 inch per hour. There is enough of a signal to warrant an addition of a moderate risk across the area between the Big Bend over into the Edwards Plateau, with emphasis on Val Verde County extending up to the neighboring counties to the north, including Interstate 10 in central Crockett County. Considering the nature of the situation, this period will be monitored very closely, and it's susceptible to larger scale changes as the setup does evolve. Heavy rainfall will likely enhance life-threatening flash flooding to portions of the region for yet another period before the setup finally looks to break after the day 3 time frame. The southwestern United States into the Great Basin. Another round of afternoon. Sorry, I just had to read that. That was an important notification. Another round of afternoon and evening convection will transpire across the southwestern conus, uh, excuse me, into the Great Basin on Thursday, with the threat carrying into the early morning periods of Friday in some locations. Models are keen on a more robust moisture advection pulse and general instability axis across the desert southwest on Thursday, with a broad axis of heavy rain prospects from the southern border all the way north into southern Utah. Ensemble bias corrected output is very bullish on the threat in and around the slot canyons of southern Utah, along the Mogollon Rim, and down towards the terrain embedded within Cochise, Santa Cruz, and Pima counties. Aerial average of 1 to 2 inches is forecast for the region along the southern border, with 0.75 to 1.25 inches forecast across the Mogollon Rim in southern Utah. Considering the environment maturing closer to 1 to 2,000 joules per kilogram of CAPE over much of Arizona, southern Utah and Nevada, instability in anomalous moisture. Within the 90th to 99th percentile of climatology across the region will produce more widespread heavy rain prospects leading to scattered flash flooding occurrences uh, in those more susceptible locations in the terrain. There is even some opportunity for thunderstorm genesis off several outflows that could impact some of the larger urban corridors within Arizona, including the Phoenix metro, as the environment favors this type of potential. A broad slight risk was introduced for much of Arizona into southern Utah, with the eastern extent out towards the New Mexico-Arizona border into the immediate Four Corners region, outlining the mean quantitative precipitation forecast closer to 0.5 inches with the ensembles. 20Z update. There is a moderate risk of excessive rainfall across portions of the lower Trans Picos, Edwards Plateau, and Rio Grande Valley. 20Z update. The biggest adjustments made from overnight was to expand the moderate risk farther north through the Edwards Plateau based on recent weather trends in Weather Prediction Center's quantitative precipitation forecast. Impacts will be heavily dependent upon where the pesky mesoscale convective vortice will be located. Most guidance, however, does show its gradual north and west movement by Thursday. Following the active day on Wednesday, portions of the Edwards Plateau, Lower Trans Pecos, and Rio Grande Valley will also likely see antecedent soil conditions grow more susceptible to excessive rainfall rates. The Ozarks and Mid-Mississippi Valley, 500 millibore trough pivoting overhead, will also have anomalous precipitable waters in excess of 2 inches throughout the generally flashy areas of the Ozarks on Thursday. Model soundings across the board show highly saturated profiles combined with skinny MLK values in excess of 1,000 joules per kilogram. Storm motion appears to be fairly slow and vertical wind shear is weak, so storms will behave more pulse-like in nature. That said, the atmospheric environment could support hourly rainfall rates up to 3 inches per hour in some of the more intense cells, and 1-hour flash flood guidances are likely to range between 2 and 3 inches. Given these factors, localized flash flooding is possible on Thursday, with poor drainage areas and complex terrain most prone to potential flooding. Okay, so I'm done because I'm not going to read day 4 and 5 anymore, because I genuinely can't, I genuinely am way too tired for this anymore. Um, but, uh, but, okay, so that was at 3:36. That was at 3:30. Okay, so basically, the the Weather Prediction Center is highlighting an extremely dangerous, potentially life-threatening event occurring in Texas right now, going into tomorrow and Thursday. So, if you are under a high risk, or a moderate risk of flash flooding, which is the pink or the red regions of flash flooding, you need to stay prepared immediately, heed all warnings and watches from the National Weather Service, National Water Center, and your local WFOs or weather forecasting offices, and be especially cautious and recognize the dangers of flooding. And also look at radar, satellite imagery, and tune into every single National Weather Service that is around you because it can save your life one day. please, for the love of God, please, be prepared, stay aware, and do not be scared. Being scared is the number one thing that will cause a person to screw things up. So don't be that person and don't be scared. Be prepared. Please, do what's right.